If you've recorded several macros that you call one after another, you can create a single macro, also known as a sub, that will call these other macros. For example, I have a reformat date and an invoice total macro that I recorded. Note that these macros do include the selection of a specific cell so that the correct column is formatted. I'm going to create a single macro called format date data. I'm going to create one sub that will call reformat date and invoice total. To create this sub, first type the word sub, then the title of your sub. Just like when recording a macro, it has to be a single word without any strange characters. And then it has to end with an opening and closing parentheses. When I hit enter, Excel helps by putting the end sub at the bottom. My code is going to go between the sub and the end sub. To call another macro, first type the word call, space, and then the name of the macro that you want to call. The word call isn't required. If I wanted to, I could just do this. But so that you know what you're doing next time you look back at the code, put the word call in front of the name of the macro. We're done. To test your sub, return to Excel and run your sub. As you can see, it properly put the total at the bottom of my column and reformatted this column. My sub only formatted dates in column D. I also have dates in column F and column G that need reformatting. To do this, go back into the VBE and look at the code that reformats my dates. What it does is it selects D2, goes to the bottom of the column, and reformats the data. I'm going to copy these 3 lines of code and paste them twice because I have 2 more columns that I want to format. Returning to Excel, I see that F2 and G2 are these cells at the top of the column. So I'm going to change this D2 to F2 and this one to G2. So now what the code does is it goes to D2, goes to the bottom of the column and sets the format. Then it goes to column F, to the bottom of the column, sets the format, and then it does the same thing to column G. Let's save our changes, and then we'll go back and test the macro. Let's run the sub that reformats our data. As you can see, column F and column G, the dates are now formatted in my new format. When I look at my list of macros, I see subs that I no longer want to run individually. For example, invoice total and reformat date are both called by format data. So let's go ahead and hide these 2 subs. To do this, we bring up the Visual Basic Editor and go to the 2 subs that we want to hide. At the beginning of the word sub, we're going to type in the word private. And at the beginning of the invoice total, we will type in the word private. What this does is it hides these 2 subs from the list of macros, but format data can still call them. So now, when we return to Excel and bring up our list of macros, you no longer see those other 2, but we can still call format data, which will run those 2 subs that we just hid from this list. What if you've recorded a macro that you want to share with someone else, or you recorded it to the active workbook but you meant to put it in your personal workbook? You don't have to re-record your macro. For example, this macro for placing green check marks next to records was stored in my personal workbook, but I want to send it with this file to somebody else. Open up your Visual Basic editor and go to the macro that you want to move. In this case, this is the only macro in Module 3. What I can do is simply drag it to the other workbook where I want it stored. As you can see, dragging it instantly made a copy of it and placed it in this workbook. Just remember that the workbook that has macros has to be saved as a macro-enabled workbook. Another way, for example, is if I have just a specific sub that I want to copy to another workbook. I can highlight from the sub to the end sub, copy. I can place it in an existing module in the other workbook, or if I want to place it in its own module, I can right-click, insert module, and paste it there. Subs found in the sheet and this work module cannot be dragged to another workbook. Why? Because you have to have a unique this workbook module, and you can't drag a sheet module between workbooks. You have to use the copy paste method of transferring subs in sheets and workbook modules.